Welcome to the virtual segment of the Tasveer Film Festival, the world's only Oscar qualifying South Asian film festival. My name is Farah, and I am the co-founder of Tasveer. And first of all, happy Diwali or Diwali to everyone who is watching. I'm wearing orange today. Um, and I will tell you a little bit about the Sphere. The Sphere is dedicated to promoting diversity, inclusion, and representation in the arts through film and storytelling. Founded by my best friend Rita Mahal and myself soon after 9/11, the Sphere has been a pioneer in showcasing diverse and thought-provoking South Asian stories. The virtual festival provides a platform for filmmakers to share their work with a global audience and foster connections between filmmakers, industry professionals, and film enthusiasts. Beyond the film festival, the Sphere also organizes various events, workshops throughout the year, including panel discussions, master classes, community screenings, and these initiatives aim to educate and inspire audiences about South Asian culture and cinema. So without further ado, we'll begin today's Q&A, and it is the last one for our virtual film festival. And I am very super excited and honored. I'm very honored to be speaking with the filmmakers of this of back then, the story of live music in Bombay. And I'm going to, we have filmmakers Abhishek and Anindita, and I will hand over the mic to Anindita Dutta Roy to talk about herself a little bit as a filmmaker, just a bio, and then we'll move after the bios, we'll move on to more of the detailed stuff about the film.
All right. Thank you so much, Farah. We are really glad and stoked to be part of the Tasveer Film Festival, such a prestigious festival, and we have made it to the North America premiere over there. So we are really happy about it. I am Anindita, and I am originally from the east side of India. I'm from Calcutta, but it's been around 12 years in Mumbai, and I really love the city. I sort of personify the city and see a lot of stories around which could be told. Back then is my first feature documentary, and it's a complete DIY film, and we have spent around 3.5 years. I love to speak about more about the documentary, but that's almost about myself. Thank you.
And we have Abhishek Chandran, and please also let us know your role in the documentary.
Sure, sure. Just echoing some of the things that Anandita said. She's the director. I began as the writer for the film, for the documentary. And we're also husband and wife, partners to each other, as well as partners in the film, and then the story of making it. While I don't have any formal background in filmmaking, I'm just an enthusiastic person who's been a lifelong music fan, failed musician, and now trying to dabble in the filmmaking space. So I think that's a little bit about me. And yeah, I've lived all my life in Bombay, born and raised in Mumbai, or as we used to call it as Bombay. And this has been partly me writing about my my growing up days. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you so much. So I want to just preface this conversation with I love is really it's really important. It's capturing historical information about a city, but also about a movement of independent music that I was also part of. I was there in the 90s, not in Mumbai, but in Seattle and in the US. And I was really following what was happening in England, mainly in London, and the scene there with Anoka. And that's when this was at the same time that this was happening in Mumbai. And I actually was not aware. That didn't reach me as a young South Asian trying to figure out independent music. But like Delhi later on reached me, but for somehow what was happening in Bombay hadn't reached me as a diaspora South Asian. So for me, it was just fascinating. And right now I'm DJing, so I've been researching all the independent music. So this was the ideal film for me to watch at this moment, and also to come to remember everything that happened. So thank you so much. So I think that today we'll just have a conversation about the film as well as about the music of just these two things coming together, using film as a way to uh, talk about music. So let's start with just when did the first, like, how, what's really interesting is how does the idea of a film birth? You know, what was that moment? So either of you can answer that question when you just was like, we need this.
Mm, okay, I'll take that. So, Farah, like, one of the things I started doing when I came to the city was I started discovering um, these spots of live music which is happening around the city, and Abhishek was one of them who would take me around and sort of expose me to different kinds of music and sounds of the city. So, and growing up, it was very different in Calcutta because I was more exposed to classical music, and Kathak as a dance is what I learned, and I was like, there was a lot of restrictions when it comes to listening to any kind of music which is not really traditional or
Mhm.
conventional. But there was always this thing in me, like when Bengali rock was becoming a thing, I always thought, like, I wish I could go for live music more or concerts. So when I came to Mumbai, like, it became a different universe. Post work, I would go to different venues, and I would be like amazed by like the kind of artist who would perform, the kind of music and sound I would listen to, the kind of stories people had to say, and the stories is what sort of used to stick by. Like, I remember I would come back from the performances and I would always recall, hey, that was a funny anecdote I heard from Abhishek and his friends, or like, someone who is like a gig goer, who would say, back then we would go for a mosh pit, and after that we would go to a hospital, like someone would get like hurt, and there used to be like there were a lot of fun stories, and it used to always, like, I'm a curious person and I want to know, hear more such stories. Like, I really am a digger for such anecdotes. So now the first thought when, like, making this film happen was during lockdown. Creativity was speaking within the house, and live music had completely stopped for us, and because of restrictions and protocols. And I'm like, there is a part of me which who misses going for live music events, but a major part of me would miss the hearing the stories of our friends, of like what they had to say about, oh, this artist back in early 2000 used to do some different form of music. So that's when, like, it sort of struck me that, what if, like, I sort of narrate these stories through the people, the anecdotes I've heard about these legendary people of the city. So, and I proposed the idea to Abhishek, and him being an insider, out and out insider, I think um, he couldn't foresee it, like, how can this my everyday become a documentary, right? So I think I had to make a presentation to sort of convince him that, hey, this has potential, and let's tell the story to the world. Yeah, that was the moment, I think. Abhishek, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, and I did feel that maybe it isn't the story that needed to be told when I first heard the idea from Anandita. Um, but she had really done her groundwork, and she had pieced together her opinion about why this needs to be told and how it needs to be told, with multiple perspectives about people who played on stage and people who put up the stage and people who were looking at the stage. Right, when she told me about the three perspectives that she had in mind, I think that's what was the beginning of. I think that was day one back then. So, yeah.
Actually, recently, DJ Rekha from New York, all of the club flyers from the same time, around the same time in
I'm
the late
so sorry, Farah.
90s.
I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, no. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I think it's better.
Okay. So when during the same time, DJ Rekha and Basement Bhangra was also happening in New York. So all the club flyers of that time are archived into the city of New York. So it is actually very important history that we may not realize that time period, how crucial and critical it was to independent music. So just to give you validation and affirmation that this was very, very important history to archive and to remember and to hold as South Asian history. So great job again. So the next thing is how was the process of like going from that um, initial idea into a full-fledged
Is it only me
Sorry,
who's not able to hear?
I think the audio is coming and going. I think it's getting interrupted.
process?
Can you say that again, please?
Okay, let me try one more thing. Can you? I'm not sure if I could do anything about this. So, can you hear me or at all? Is it still going in and out?
Right now, it's going fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I
You're
think when I
talking,
start, yeah.
you're
Okay.
talking about the process. Yeah.
Okay. Just the process of the film from once you decided to move forward, finding all of the resources.
Um, so, a we decided first that hey, we are going to tell this story ourselves in our way. So we sort of made a tight crew of 5 people. We did not want to approach a studio or any kind of we did not want any kind of backing because we wanted to tell the story in our way. So which required like working with people you can trust. And I think the first thing was building a team who can sort of make our dream come true, and they should be a music lovers. So I think that was our first criteria. And that's where people like Ritvik Ghosh, who is our executive producer, Madhurima Basuroy, and Saurabh Regu were are the editors who onboarded, jumped into making this film with us. So we have been very fortunate. Ultimately, there was Zico, who is the sound designer for the film. He joined. He himself is a musician. So I think when that group of people we came together, and we would uh, decide on how to make this film. Second was plotting who all do we want to interview in terms of getting perspectives, and it sort of evolved. Farah, for example, the wish list we had, that who would be the artist from the 90s, who would be the person from representing early 2000s as a gig goer. So we started planning and mapping people like that, like who can be interview, and who has more legendary stories, or who can tell us a lot of anecdotes, right? Who is more enterprising. I think that sort of thinking went behind. something I think which we tried to like we wanted to bring into foreplay is a DIY scene is only created when someone also provides you with the platform. So it's not about the artist being an artist, but when the artist is given a platform by someone who equally trusts the artist process or like the music they're listening to, I think that comes into that is a big thing. That person also becomes a hero, right? So hence we also paid attention to people who would create the events. So earlier when you said Anuka and I remember Tejas Mangeshkar, who is also Bhavishyavani Future Sounds co-founder, and he had mentioned how he sort of went out of the way from his traditional Bollywood roots to dive into something which is more related to subculture. So and he provided with the platform to many such artists, and he created the many stories around subculture in back in the 90s and early 2000s, and it's still thriving. So he set that tone, right? So finding out interesting subjects, and we had an intense amount of research which went behind each one of them. And there was a point where I felt like each one of them can have a solo documentary. Like they are so interesting, they have so many stories to say, and they have like varied interest. What we had not thought of is that how will this story come together, and that was more in the post after we were done with the interviews. And I think Abhishek was a big contributor there, because he had the knowledge of like um, the, how the story should be told in a manner which should do justice to each one of the subjects and each one of the genres, right? And we did not want to make any genre or any artist look smaller or bigger, something like that. We want it to be fair throughout. So I think there was a lot of creative discussions, and around 1.5 year we spent on the edit table, like thinking what should be the storyline of it, like how do we want to say, in a linear fashion, in a mixed match fashion, and yeah, deciding on the sound of the film as well. That was probably the entire process, and we had a lot of creative disputes, because see, ultimately each one of us, even though we will listen to different genres of music, we always have our favorites, so we will always push for that, right? So but we yeah, I think I hope I answered your question, but that was
I just,
essentially the
I just want
process.
to add to that. I think Anindita, as the director, charted out this framework of sorts, which is this sort of like a slide, which was a grid, which had 18 blank spots, and we needed to kind of fill up who will be the right person over there, and contributed to building that environment, that contributed to playing music in that environment, and also the kind of people who we could find who were there and who could give us a first person record of what happened over there. So that was, I think, the starting point where that as a structure always remained. And whenever there was a challenge in the creative process, we always went back to that. And because we felt it was important to tell the story from different voices. And somewhere through the journey is when we realized that it's not about finding the most popular person, the most known person as such, because we felt that since this is the story of the Bombay underground, and if you're truly looking for the story of the underground, then we must find the people who were the pillars of that space, and that's not necessarily the people who sort of wear a crown or something, right? And so they were all people who we very fondly call the misfits, and we I identify as one as myself. So we wanted to make sure that we get the right kind of people who can come and tell the story, that that's essentially the story of their lives. So that I think that was sort of the structure that we went with. And when talking about the music, what Ananta also mentioned, we had choices to make about whether it's about building a background score, or about actually transporting the viewer to that time in, say, 1995. And the only way we realized we could do that is that the only time machine that the world has is music, so we need to bring music from that point of time and put that in the backdrop of the narrative. So I think that's how the music played a very important role, along with the people who played the music and made it happen.
Yeah, it was great. um, Next thing is, what's been the journey of screening the film to the musicians, to the current musicians, as well as in the music world, screening the film there, and what are your plans about that
To the music world.
in Bombay? Like, I think it's important for this film to get out to the current musicians. And is there any plans to for them to watch it, or have they watched this film?
Abhishek, you want to take that?
I think the first time we ever played the film in its whole, the audience was the cast, who were essentially the people from the music world, and who we felt would be the, if they felt that the story lands, I thought we were convinced that it would. So that they were the first audience that saw it, and through them they gave us a lot of ideas of where it should be seen, because as a music documentary, we weren't always sure that we needed to be seen at essentially at places where only film is seen. Probably we could be seen at places where music is important. And we did do a guerrilla screening, as we call it. It was a unlisted screening that we did at the beginning of the year, just with some friends who made it happen at a music festival called Control Alt Delete, which is also explored in the film. And they were kind enough to put the film on a certain stage, and where there were the audience was people who attended the music festival. And we were happy that at least, and that's a very special festival, because that's a festival that fuses everything that is alternative and obscure. So the audience over there were also of the right kind of mindset. And I think we started over there, and we do have a dream of being seen at more music festivals, as well as apart from film festivals. So we're working on it. We don't have a concrete plan as of now, because it is a DIY venture. And but we do hope that in the coming year we will be able to play it to a larger music oriented audience.
It was sort of like very nice when we played that as a art film as a surprise screening at Control Alt Delete, which is the only DIY crowd-funded music festival in from India. And you can expect the crowd over there. They come across socioeconomic dynamics to different corners of the city, and for the artists who are up and coming and also established. So when we were doing the surprise screening, it was by the end of the festival, so we thought people would leave. There will be probably 10 to 12 people, because it was also happening at a remote location. uh, what happened was, suddenly we see like there are more than 200 people. There was no place to sit, but throughout the 58 minutes they were glued to the screen, and it was a riot. I mean, they loved the film so much. They were having conversations while the film was playing, which was great, because they were like, "Yeah, I was there when it happened," or like, "I wish this happens again," something like that. And now when we go for gigs, like I think a weekend back when I was attending a gig of an artist, like, two young kids, they came up to me and then they were like, "Oh, you made back then, it's like amazing, like, we are trying to make something in the journal space when it comes in India, because right now we don't have a publishing house where you get to see all kinds of music being covered." So, and they were very inspired from the film. So it gives us a lot of happiness that somewhere there are movements, there is some exposure which is making difference. And yeah, we would love for this film to play at both relevant film festivals and also music festivals.
Yeah, correct. And also clubs. I think that it's really a great way to great places to also screen the film is at clubs, because that's where the audience would really appreciate this. And to just talk about the global scene, because we were talking about what's happening in Mumbai, but this alternative South Asian scene was all over the world, and how you are connected to other parts where it's happening. It was happening in Delhi, it's happening in London, it's happening in New York, San Francisco, just everywhere.
Yes, and a lot of Indians who are probably second generation immigrants in different countries or third generation, they and like, to me it feels like this is how they are staying connected to their roots, is through the music. And so you see such amazing kind of, like, music which is probably in Tamil or in different languages, but they are based out of say Singapore or Canada or something like that. So it's diverse, and like this is probably the best time for, like, South Asian stories and artists to sort of come forward and display their talent globally.
Any thoughts, Abhishek?
I just want to echo whatever Ananta is saying, and I mean, the music fraternity, I think, is very primed for things like this, and I do believe that there should be a lot more narrative around it, a lot more stories around it. While we did this just because I mean, we felt like doing it. Nobody asked us to do it, and I think that should be the way these sort of projects should be treated. And and yeah, and I think that musicians inherently do behave in that manner. So it's a great space to bring in film and music together. I think it's what needs to be done, and we hope to do a lot more.
Yeah.
It's just beginning for us.
And even in Pakistan, I didn't mention Pakistan. Pakistan also had rock bands around the same time that were their Vital Signs and Junoon. So I don't know if that was. I think my question is about, was the global scene also in Mumbai at that time? Did they know what was happening in the rest of the world?
We actually were very surprised during some of the interviews because the thing is that this sort of music, which is very alternative, doesn't really play on radios or on the television in Bombay or in India in general. And at that point of time, it was very limited in a pre-internet era. So all of the people we spoke to, we had to ask them, what is it that got you listening to this sort of sound? And they always talked about cousins who lived abroad and who were visiting during festivals. They brought in tapes, and that kind of helped. And then the, the bootleg world also helped in many ways to help get the sound from all corners of the planet into this space. And I think that the turning point that we realized was when the internet chat rooms started becoming a bit more mainstream. I think that's where a lot of sound was shared and a lot of information was shared. Otherwise it was something that was restricted to people who had traveled abroad or who had family abroad, who would bring the sound back here. And so you mentioned about the Anokha guys, and when we were talking to the Bhavashwani crew, they told us that they were also familiar with them at that point in time. They used to talk online, and they used to share sounds and recordings of things that they made here and what was being played over there. And they were very influenced because that they were doing drum and bass in Bombay in 1998, I think. And that and I personally, as a person who was listening to drum and bass in say the late 2000s, I thought we were the first 100 people to hear about it in Bombay, and we were so wrong because there was a scene of people who were bringing that music from all parts of the world, scouting it and playing it for a small audience over here, maybe 100 people, but that kept growing, and they kept doing it, and they started building that sound. So there is a lot of influence from the world, because this is not inherently a naturally Indian sound. This is just a sound, and so I think it came from anywhere, and whoever enjoyed it kind of started playing it across.
It's
So
a
that's
fusion sound. It's a fusion sound of mixing various genres as well as cultures, and depending on where the diaspora is, and also what is happening around race. Like, it's very racialized, meaning I think once we start moving to hip hop, it went from like race was talked about as in rock, which was a white genre. It went into a globally black genre. So how is there anything else that you can add besides what was in the film about that?
I think
Of
that's a
what,
that's a
how?
very interesting question, and we also thought about it, because when hip hop started exploding in the city, we did wonder how did this happen, because this is a sound that's been around since the 80s, and if metal and DNB could make it, so could hip hop. But I think it just happened in the last 10 years, where where I think the journey that people listening to rock and roll went through in the 80s, the the people growing up in this generation, they discovered this sound, I think, more because of the internet and TikTok and Instagram and all of those things. That played a big influence to really get exposure to that kind of music. And and one of the things that the rap artist that we interviewed, Dhawal D Evil from the Gully Gang crew, who was nice enough to host us in his house, where we met him and we caught up with him, and he told us stories about his time. He told us that the best thing that happened was that this genre of music, which is the hip hop side of things, unlike anything that came before, was extremely analog, in the sense that it didn't require an instrument, it didn't require a console, not a drum kit. It just required you to do it, and most of it was. I think they spoke about how there was no equipment, so a beat would be beatboxed, and lines would be written by hand, or just improvised, and that I think that was a very telling thing for us. When he told us that, that's when it started making sense. That okay, so this is the kind of sound that didn't require any sort of equipment, and that was very interesting. In the film, he also goes on to say that it's the sound that did not need a stage. It's the sound of people that you can just get on the streets and start rapping, and people will kind of listen to you. But these are some of the stories that didn't make it to the lineup.
I think also like the initial years, a like you I mean all these artists like who were exploring alternate form of music. Yes, the exposure to rock metal was way higher than anything else. So the I think at least a decade was spent about making the music heard and ensuring like hey, we exist, we this sort of music exists, and there are misfits, or there are people around the world, within the city especially, who are listening to this sort of music, apart from Bollywood, right? So I think the desire to make this sort of music heard was like the first goal. And towards the later part, after like internet revolution and like more exposure, and more spaces for people to sort of go around in the city and sort of explore, that's where stories which are coming from different corners of the city, be it from the slums, be it from different societies, be it about the protest which are happening, be it about the caste system. So rap became a very nice tool to sort of deliver that sort of messaging. It sort of always existed, but the confidence level, I think it went high because because I think internet had to do a lot with it. And also the fact that the common groups came into play. So these like D Evil, whom Abhishek said, like he said that I found my like-minded people on Facebook groups, and so imagine anyone from whichever 1 BHK, 2 BHK sort of a house. Are connecting to, like they are connecting to someone who is living in some other part of the city, and probably has a different kind of other socioeconomic background, but they're connecting over that sort of music. So they're coming together on a Sunday afternoon and meeting somewhere by the by Juhu Beach or that sort of a place, and they are just doing ciphers and they are bonding, and then other people are noticing and they are like, hey, we can also explore this. So it starts getting expanded, and a lot of live venues which are up and coming, they are also thinking that, okay, fine, we can give these guys a space to sort of perform. And if we can't afford, like the high end artist, why not give space to up and coming artists? Probably this will become big in few years. So I think the that sort of a decade change, and with internet coming into playing a big role, I think that helped quite a bit.
Yeah, there's the film, there's a Netflix series called Get Down. I don't know if you've seen it or if it's available. That shows the birth of hip hop. And it's very similar to what you're saying, just rappers on the street coming together. So that's just how it comes together globally. And we have a few audience questions here. There was how long did it take to make this film from initial concept to completion? And you did answer that with 3.5 years. And if you have, just moving the conversation more to film, if you have any advice for young folk who want to be filmmakers but don't know where to start.
Mm. Even I didn't know when to start. I always thought I'll have enough. I should have enough bank balance by the age of 40 so that I can start making my first feature. That was my aim. It was inspired from a friend with whom I went for media studies and all. And but the thing is, look at it, like I made. I mean, I never thought like live music would be the first subject I delve into. It's I always thought it'll be probably about women and the women communities, because I'm very driven by this subject. But and the right moment happened when I gave my thoughts a space. So the moment, the only advice is, the moment you start giving attention to what's going on in the back of your mind, and not let it not let your mind get occupied with the other things happening around, be it work or be it other things, I think it can be a right time to get started, at least with writing it down on a paper, or making a slide, or making a video out of it. Anything, it can be, any time could be a good time, as long as you're giving space to your back in the head thoughts.
And I think you brought up a very important point, is about women. It was so male dominated, and even now as a DJ, it's very hard to find women artists, and any set is dominated by men. Any thoughts on making sure that of the inclusion of women? I think there was more inclusion of women in this film because of your viewpoint. So any what was that a hurdle to find women's voices?
So initially, before making the film, I really wanted to bring out the fact that, just like the kind of background I had, was there difficulties for people, for women in the cities to go for a gig, and fortunately, unfortunately, the women whom we interviewed, they were sort of blessed that, okay, they were allowed to go for these gigs, even if there were like five people in the crowd, five women in the crowd, and rest of them are all guys. And when it comes to artists in rock and metal, again, like there was the majority were men, of course, but there was always a fan following basis genre, right? but so when I saw that, okay, it is not about women in Bombay were allowed to go for late night gigs. In fact, there was like a 50-50 ratio for a Bhavishyavani, which is more electronic, which is more late night than a rock Indian metal scene. So there was more women in the city. So I guess in general, Mumbai as a city is perceived to be probably one of the safest places for women in the country. I don't think the issue lies in the restrictions of women going out and exploring the thing. Um, but the fact always remains that yes, in fact, a lot of women artists who I follow, they always share every day. There are stories around how the lineup is only about only of men, and just for like a tick mark, there will be one woman in the set list. So that still exists, and I just feel it becomes I don't think people, the organizers in that case, they realize that that's how they they are sort of omitting, like, a majority of good talent. So that comes into play. But there are people like Sohail Arora, like Crunk. Always, I have seen him. He is always balancing the fact that it's not about gender as long as it's good talent, and he promotes a lot of women DJs in his in his different ventures. So he has a lot of what do you call it, mnemonics, no, what is it,
Yeah, different stage names.
different stage names. So he'll always ensure, like, the diverse talent from India goes to global and play, and vice versa. So I think there are some people who are making conscious decisions, but the issues is still underlying, where a lot of places, especially I think the non-metro cities, are not choosing the more amount of female artists, in my opinion, of course.
Any thoughts on that, Abhishek? On women?
We when we went for metal shows when we were say 15 years old, um, the crowd would be 100 people, and it would be 95% boys and 5 girls, and it was um, it was strange to see that, because we all have a lot of sisters and family, and so it was a bit strange to see that. But I think from then to today, that number has very slowly grown, hasn't grown where it's a very equal thing. And like Anandita mentioned, I think the form of music has a lot to do with it. So in the metal space, uh, for whatever reasons, that's how the split of the number of people were. But in the electronic space, we saw that it was a bit more even.
Yeah.
I don't have a scientific response as to why that is, but it just seems to be that. And even when you look at the hip hop space, there are a lot of women who rap and make music and produce music and all of those things who are getting a lot of focus today. But of course, things could be better, and I think there's a long way to go. I don't think this live music in Bombay or in India is anywhere near its saturation point or even maturity. It's just at the beginning, and so I think in that, if I'm in, I've been telling everybody I'm in my half glass full era right now. So I think that's the reason I'm sounding very hopeful. It would be nice that it gets more even, and and hopefully we'll be there to check it out at that point.
Okay, last few questions. What is your current project as far as film or music?
I'm working. I've just started working on my. It's a documentary again, and I don't think I'll be able to disclose much. But again, it's something around subculture in from the, like, something very close to Indian subculture, and there have been many stories which came my way, like, to cover. But I was, of course, after, I'm guessing a lot of people, filmmakers, face this. I was I still have that imposter syndrome, like where I feel like, okay, I did not make this. But So I was battling that for a long time, and but when this sort of story came into my foray, I was like, yes, this is something which um, is something I would like to again bring out to the world. So I think my knack goes for stories which are uh, probably restricted to a certain geography, and I love it when I get to say it to the world. So yeah, so it's again like a subcultural element uh, from south of India, and we are just getting started with it.
I'm not part of that project though. I am. I think for me, as after doing this entire thing, and which took so long, I'm a bit apprehensive about jumping into the next thing, because if it's going to take another 3 to 5 years, that's a lot of my time, and so I'm a little guarded about choosing something. But I do have a wish list where I try to get into the world of fiction and write a short story, perhaps that could be a short film. And there are ideas being thrown around with certain friends, but uh, and the only thing that comes naturally to me is this space around music. So a lot of people are encouraging me to kind of put a story that's built in the universe of music, because people have heard stories set in a school or in a college, or at a workplace. So this might be an interesting space for me to explore. So that's something cooking in my mind.
Okay, any last thoughts that kind of wraps up our interview today? Any other thoughts that maybe I didn't ask or you want to plug anything?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Farah.
Okay. I mean, are there any last thoughts? Because this is the end of the our interview.
And the only thought I can have is that since you've liked our film, please spread the word, because we are completely DIY. And yeah, and just like I want to give a small shout out to, no, a big shout out to the crew, uh, uh, Jitin, Ritvik, Madhurima, Swaroop, Ziko, Saurabh, and thanks for being part of this film, and thanks for trusting us the process. Thanks to Shailaja, of course, for liking our film and choosing it for Tasveer. That's about it.
Yeah, we were really bummed out that we couldn't be there in Seattle to be a part
Yeah.
of the celebrations of the festival, because from everything that we saw on social media, it looked like something that we would have loved to be a part of. But there's probably look forward to that in the future. And we're really, and the moment we heard about the Sphere curating us into their lineup, we were so excited that okay, this is happening in a place where music is important from a historical sense. So that I think I just wanted to bring that out, uh, and announce it, because it is I'm personally a fan of grunge music, and I know that's the home of where all that happened back in the 90s. So I was really personally excited that it got a place over there in the US.
Yep, I was part of that scene too, so it is really great. We actually had Corner Shop from London come out to Seattle in the late 90s. So there's
I think
definitely a lot
we
of
should make
history.
more phone calls.
Mhm. Okay, great. Well, it was wonderful to speak with you both, and I'm really excited about this film being out there. And Tasveer and myself will definitely support its viewings, and we will help you and support you in getting it out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us. Right, bye.
Yeah. Bye
Bye.
bye.